Welcome back, everyone. We are continuing how Rome conquered Greece. We saw the Second Macedonian War last episode. This episode, we're going to be talking mainly about the Syrian War. And what does this have to do with Greece? I don't even know. That's what we're going to learn today. The Syrian War and how it kind of breeds this pre-context that we can dive deeper into how Rome conquered Greece. Sit back, relax, hit that like button, and let's jump right in, shall
we? Savior of Greece. During the Isthmian Games of Spring 196, Flamininus declared that Rome would leave the Greeks free, untaxed, and autonomous after over a century of Macedonian rule. He was mobbed at the festivities and showered with honors from the grateful city-states. The Roman Senate decreed 5
because they had been kind of like at the mercy of the Macedonian hegemonic rule since Philip, like the father of Alexander the Great. If that's not true, provide the context in the comments below, but that's kind of what I'm getting.
5 days of thanksgiving for the victory at Cynoscephali. Also at the games, Flamininus was met by a party of envoys who had come at the behest of the Seleucid king Antiochus III. They came in order to congratulate the consul on his victory, and to assure the Romans of their liege's peaceful intentions. They were met with cold sternness and demands. Antiochus was to keep away from the Greek cities, withdraw his garrisons from those he had already seized, and was ordered not to attempt a crossing into Greece. Now we need to follow the admonished envoys back east, where they informed their sovereign, Antiochus III, of the Roman demands.
Remember last time they had some demands for the Illyrian people to stop piracy. That didn't work out. See if the Seleucid Emperor, or regent, or whatever, what he does.
While Rome and Macedon were fighting at Cynoscephali, Antiochus, who was also known as the Great, was concluding the Fifth Syrian War against his traditional rival, the Ptolemies of Egypt. By the last year of the conflict, the realm that was created by the Diadochi of Alexander, Seleucus, became the biggest empire of its time, taking over Caria, Lycia, Cilicia, Coele-Syria, and other Asiatic holdings of the Ptolemies. So it is not a surprise that Antiochus, who was considered one of the best commanders of the era, was angry at the Roman intrusion into Greek affairs and the rebuke of his diplomats, and was confident in his strength.
So it's kind of like, I thought I was the top dog mentality.
In this period, Antiochus started creating a fleet off the coast of southern Asia Minor, probably planning to invade Ephesus, Egypt. However, his fleet's movement to the west prompted a reaction from Rhodes. The small island wasn't strong enough to compete with the Seleucids on the land, but had a dominant navy, so Antiochus promised to leave Halicarnassus to the Rhodians and not create a base on Samos in exchange for free passage of his navy through Rhodian waters.
Okay.
With a war avoided, in 196 BC, Antiochus took over the remainder of the Ptolemaic holdings in Asia Minor, including the crucial Ephesus. He then decided to conquer the territory of the weakened Macedon, and took Abydos and Ilium, which meant—
So there's a power vacuum. Ilium, formerly known as Troy, remember, the same place where Alexander made a sacrifice on his way to attack the Achaemenids. Interesting.
Meant that he now had a perfect location to cross the Hellespont. The citizens of nearby Lampsacus were worried that they were next, and in a sign of how things had changed in the last decade, sent envoys to the Romans asking for protection. At that point in time, the cities in the area were under Thracian control, and Antiochus obviously knew—
Right, because you got Thracia right there.
That restoring Hellenic rule would be seen favourably by the Greeks. So he traversed the Hellespont, first taking Chersonesos and then besieging Maditos. The fall of the latter forced other cities to submit, and Antiochus increased his influence by rebuilding the city of Lysimachia, which effectively bottled up the Gallipoli Peninsula. This might have impressed some of the Greeks, but the Romans weren't amused. deciding that Antiochus's takeover of Gallipoli was a breach of the ultimatum. Roman politics was dominated by two men, the victor of Cynocephaly, Titus Quinctius Flamininus, and the hero of the war against Carthage, Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus.
Yep. Scipio, the son of a Scipio. I think obviously these names are just transcending. Those are two formidable, did you say those were the consuls? Let me back up, I'm sorry.
Was a breach of the ultimatum. Roman politics was dominated by two men, the victor of Cynocephaly, Titus Quinctius Flamininus.
Well, you didn't say consul.
The peace party, led by Flamininus, prevailed, so the Republic sent a diplomatic mission to Lysimachia, demanding that Antiochus leave Europe and return the Ptolemies their lost territories in Asia Minor.
Well, that's a little interesting because the Ptolemaic kingdom was fighting the Seleucid kingdom. The Seleucid kingdom made demands, and that's like their own thing. And the Ptolemaic city-states or cities or whatever that are along Anatolia, wouldn't that be more on the Seleucid Ptolemaic like dispute versus the mediator Rome, especially if there was losses by the Ptolemaic kingdom which granted advance to the Seleucids? Maybe not.
However, by the time it arrived, Antiochus had already agreed on peace with Egypt by marrying his daughter and the 10-year-old Ptolemy V. He claimed that as Ptolemy was his son-in-law, he was not going to fight him anymore. As negotiations continued, news arrived that the Ptolemaic king was dead. Antiochus immediately broke off talks and rushed to Ephesus, and from there to Antioch, confirming the Roman suspicions that the Seleucids wanted even more territory. We don't have all the details.
Well, Rome wants more territory. What are you talking about?
But it is known that the king attempted to launch an invasion of Cyprus, but the expedition ended in failure, either due to a storm or a mutiny. Returning to the shore, Antiochus decided to attack Egypt directly, but received news that Ptolemy wasn't dead. The campaign was over before it began. Antiochus signed a peace treaty with his son-in-law and then returned to Ephesus. During this period, the Seleucid ruler continued using diplomacy to improve his international situation. Pergamon, ruled by the Attalid dynasty, was the traditional rival of the Seleucids, and eager to change that, he attempted to marry his daughter Antiochus to its king Eumenes II. The latter came to the conclusion that an alliance with the Romans was preferable, and rejected the offer. But
yeah, I mean, if I was to choose, of course hindsight's 20/20.
But Antiochus was unfazed, and entered a marriage alliance with the king of Cappadocia, Ariarathes, instead. At the same time, his diplomats brought rich gifts to the Galatians, as Antiochus wanted to have the backing of the famed Celtic warriors. An event that happened in 194 BC proves to a modern audience how interconnected the ancient world was. However, for the ancients themselves, it made the diplomatic situation even more complicated. Famous Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca was exiled from his homeland and
I'm gonna read this. In 195, he was elected Safae judge, one of two senior magistrates of the Carthaginian Republic, and he backed a number of reforms that strengthened democratic aspects of the Carthaginian institution. Despite this involvement, Hannibal's political opponents arranged for his exile, which is more, yeah, I mean, think about it. All the people that's been exiled before is more of like a peace proposition. In 195, and spread rumors in Rome that he was plotting to renew hostility. Interesting.
arrived at the Seleucid court in Ephesus in the hopes that he could become a mercenary commander. Antiochus received him politely, but, probably worried that Hannibal might outshine him, kept him at arm's length. The Romans, worried about Hannibal's arrival, sent their own envoys. Trying to sow discord between the king and the exile, the diplomats deliberately paid more attention to the latter. Understanding that this put him in danger, Hannibal told Antiochus the story of how his father, Hamilcar, compelled him to swear an oath of eternal enmity against the Romans.
Yep.
This immediately improved the Carthaginians' standing in the court. Between 193 and 192 BC, the Romans and Seleucids continued engaging in diplomacy, mostly discussing the Seleucid presence in Europe, but the talks were going nowhere. Another regional power looking for allies was the Aetolian League. Fearing that the Roman alliance with their rival Achaean League was a danger.
That's a good little pop-up right there, because I'm not too familiar with these leagues. There are the Achaean League, the Aetolian League, the Hellenistic League that oversees all of that, it feels like.
They sent envoys to Antiochus. In 192 BC, the Seleucid ruler agreed to enter an alliance and sent his representative to the Aetolian assembly. Unexpectedly, the latter passed a resolution inviting Antiochus to liberate Greece and settle affairs between the Aetolians and Romans. Although Antiochus knew that it was a move that might ignite war with the Romans, this was an offer the king couldn't refuse without losing prestige. So when the Aetolians promised that they would support him with their troops, he agreed to cross into Greece. The Roman historians claim that it was Hannibal who talked Antiochus into going to war, but the former was at that point in Syria. The first move of the war was made by the Aetolians. Their troops killed the unpopular Spartan king Nabis, hoping to take over the city and put pressure on the Achaean League, but the locals rebelled and the invaders had to retreat. Unfortunately for the Spartans, they were left defenseless, and soon soldiers of the Achaean League entered the city and forced it to become a member of the League, ending Spartan independence forever in the—
Right, Sparta's historically been isolationist all the way back hundreds of years, so this is a schism in their methodology of politics.
Process. The Aetolians weren't discouraged though, and in order to give Antiochus a good place to land his army, they took control of the city called Demetrius, which had an excellent harbour. The king had a small navy that wasn't able to transport all of his troops, so after offering a sacrifice to the goddess Athena at Ilium, he started crossing the Aegean Sea in the autumn of 192 BC. It seems that the land route from Thrace through Macedonia was rejected to not push Philip V into the anti-Seleucid camp. Antiochus disembarked at Demetrius and moved south to Lamia, where the Aetolians held their assembly. Here he was received as a liberating hero and elected the leader of the League.
Okay.
Still, the king—
Momentum is going in Antiochus going in his way right now.
Found himself in an awkward position. The Romans had no troops in the region, and the liberator of Greece couldn't attack the Greeks, and thus the Seleucids lacked a clear military target. In an absence of one, Antiochus once again was looking for allies. First, he approached the crucial city of Chalcis, which had been garrisoned by Attalid and Achaean troops ever since the end of the Second Macedonian War. The king attempted to convince the city to join him, but was rebuked, and although he had enough troops to take it by force, he decided not to shed the blood of fellow Greeks and returned to Demetrius. Then he sent envoys to Athens, the Achaeans, Macedon, and the Athemanians. The latter were—
The Athemanians were an ancient Greek or Hellenized tribe in southeastern Epirus. Interesting, did not know that. Why they put that little footnote.
either a Greek or Hellenized tribe who rose to prominence in the turmoil of the Diadochi Wars and agreed to help, while Philip V, still reeling from his defeat at Cynocephaly, was biding his time, and the Achaeans decided to retain their alliance with Rome. Things were much more dramatic on the Athenian front. The oligarchic party wanted to support the Romans, the Democratic Party Antiochus. The former invited the forces of the Achaean League, which led to violent street battles, during which the Seleucid supporters were defeated.
So we basically got like an all-out civil war happening in the Greek state. You got the Achaean League, the Aetolian League, you got one that's backing the Seleucids, you got one that's backing Romans, and then inner cities are just kind of like, depending on who's in charge, is kind of like propping one or the other up, which is causing what we're seeing. Crazy.
Rome knew of the Seleucid activity, and the praetor Marcus Baebius was sent to Apollonia with more than 20,000 Romans and Italics. Despite the fact that they outnumbered Antiochus, the Romans had no intention to look like an aggressor, so they didn't declare war, but Baebius's presence was enough to keep Macedon in check. Unfortunately for the Romans, they had to support their allies, and when the garrison of Chalcis asked for reinforcements, Baebius sent 500 legionaries their way. We can assume that this was the last straw for Antiochus, as he ordered his admiral Polysenides to block the narrow Euripus Strait between Chalcis and mainland Greece, and march south with the remainder of his army.
So what's happening is Antiochus is trying to make Rome look like an aggressor in the situation. It seems that way, to where they strike first. We're just defending our allies of Greece, and Rome's barbaric, imperialistic nature is trying to. That's what the whole point of him liberating the Greek states. It seems. It's interesting.
By the time the Roman contingent reached the crossing, it was blocked by the Seleucid navy, so it continued south to wait for transports at Delium. Shortly after, this unit was surrounded and destroyed by the Seleucids, beginning the war that would later be called the Seleucid War, the Syrian War, and the War of Antiochus. Some sources claim that the Romans had already declared war at that point, but the message reached Antiochus after the skirmish at Delium.
It's already happened.
Still hopeful to get the Achaeans and the Pergamene to enter into an alliance with him, Antiochus allowed the garrison of Chalcis to leave under a truce. Soon the rest of Euboea capitulated to the king. His next targets were the cities of the Boeotian League, which surrendered quickly, and the Thessalian League, created by the Romans after the Second Macedonian War. Antiochus still attempted to negotiate, however he noticed that the members of the league started to mobilize under the cover of these talks, so in early 191 BC, he moved swiftly and captured the league's main city, Pherae, massacring its defenders. He then moved into the league's territory, and in a short and decisive campaign, took over most of the cities in the region, save for the stronghold of Larissa, which was besieged by the Seleucids.
Getting real.
While the siege was ongoing, Antiochus sent 2,000 men south to the field of Cynoscephalae. In a symbolic gesture, his soldiers buried the Greek dead, whose bones remained on the battlefield. By doing that, the Seleucid ruler was trying to show how full of piety he was in comparison to the barbarous Romans.
Literally what I said, and it's funny because the optics will work for the defections or the allies, but it will not save you from the Roman military might.
And how much more he cared for their fellow Hellenes than Philip. The latter considered this gesture a direct...
Well, the Romans really don't like Philip that much, but Philip is acting as a Roman vassal state, or, sorry, it's not even a vassal state, alliance state or something like that, but it's kind of, he's third party right now.
Insult, and declared his allegiance to Rome.
Yeah.
Baebius immediately entered negotiations with the Macedonian king, gaining the right of military access. A 2,000-strong legionary detachment under Appius Claudius was sent south, probably as a reconnaissance force. The details are unclear, but apparently the Roman commander arrived at Tempe and built a larger camp full of extra campfires to exaggerate his numbers. Although sources assume that Antiochus was tricked into thinking that the Roman-Macedonian attack was imminent and raised the siege, it was probably due to the weather and supply situation. In any case, he soon started his retreat to Chalcis. Both sides were now waiting for spring. In Chalcis, Antiochus decided that another dynastic marriage was in order, but this time he tied a knot himself with a daughter of a local noble, perhaps to prove to the minor Greek nobles who ruled in the majority of city-states that he was on their side. Such royal marriages were common in the East, but backfired with the locals, who considered sexual activity detrimental to war-making. Additionally, during the celebrations, the Greeks were once again shocked by the practice of their Macedonian brethren of drinking undiluted wine, and the king's participation in this activity further diminished his standing. During his stay on the island, Antiochus continued to look for allies, but gained none. He also sent messengers to Asia, ordering reinforcements.
You're gonna need reinforcements.
The Romans were not idle. The alliance with the Achaean League, Pergamon and Rhodes was confirmed, and the consul of the year, a supporter of Scipio, Manius Acilius Glabrio, was to lead a new 15,000-man army to Greece.
They're bringing elephants? The first time I've ever seen Rome with elephants. That's interesting. That's definitely a tip of the hat to Carthage.
Show of how crucial this war was for the Romans, two ex-consuls, Marcus Porcius Cato and Valerius Flaccus, were chosen by him as the legates. It is also remarkable that both legates belonged to Flamininus's party, which meant that the rival parties put their differences aside to defeat Antiochus. While the main army was crossing the Adriatic, Cato landed in the Peloponnese and went on a diplomatic tour of Achaia and Athens, sarcastically claiming that Antiochus wages war through letters and fights with pen and ink. Before Glabrio reached Illyria in March, Baebius and Philip V started their campaign against the Seleucid garrisons in Thessaly.
I mean, if Antiochus was to win this war, he would be a legend. But I don't know if he has enough time or troops to be able to take this. He's gonna have to probably pull out of Greece pretty quickly. I mean, there's just so much pressure up north, and you have like all these possible defections of these cities. It's not very, the borders aren't very cut and dry. Plus you got Cato stirring things up down below, where things are just gonna get sandwiched sort of. So Antiochus is about to flee.
The only major anti-Roman force in the region were the Athamanians, and they were defeated quickly, followed by the Seleucid garrisons, which negated all the gains Antiochus made in his campaign in Thessaly. Antiochus, meanwhile, consolidated his forces in Boeotia and then moved west towards Acarnania to take control of it and put pressure on the Epirotes in order to add their troops to his.
Careful though, because you could get cut off.
Acarnania was also important in terms of gaining a port in the Ionian Sea and to cut the direct line between Italy and the Achaean League. The city of Medion joined the Seleucid cause via diplomatic pressure. However, the Romans now had more than 35,000 troops in the area and were supported by a 5,000-strong army from Philip, so the Acarnanians and Epirotes declared their support for them.
Dang!
Antiochus's army, even with the additions of the Aetolians, numbered less than 20,000. There were no allies to find in Greece, and no reinforcements from Asia were coming soon, possibly due to the allied Rhodian and Attalid activity in the Aegean Sea. Outnumbered 2-1, he couldn't stay in Aetolia, as the Roman march south was now threatening his supply and retreat lines. At the same time, he didn't want to abandon the Aetolians. Initially, the allies decided to defend at Lamia, but that would have given the Romans an opportunity to outflank them. So in a true Hellenic fashion, Antiochus moved for Thermopylae. This famous location had seen numerous last stands before and after April 191 BC, as it was a natural choke point, defended by Mount Calidromos and Mount Tychius from the southwest, and the waters of the Malian Gulf from the northeast. Still, as Leonidas and Xerxes discovered 300 years before, this seemingly ideal defensive position had a fatal flaw. A small army could have bottlenecked a far larger force in the passage, but the mountains had numerous paths, making it possible to outflank the defenders.
Yep.
Both armies were culturally steeped in Greek history and mythos, so obviously knew of this.
And that's where we're going to stop today. Because the Battle of Thermopylae. Is this like the Battle of Thermopylae? Because the original one, which is also cited within 300 Spartans, blah blah, Leonidas, all of that's kind of where I'm thinking of as the Battle of Thermopylae. So they just need to get better at naming battles. Maybe it's just me, but guys, I think the moral of the story here is the Seleucid Empire and Antiochus seems to be, I don't know if they thought they're the big dog, but they certainly were acting like it, and they're trying to push a lot of levers and buttons in Greece to kind of create more of a sphere of influence in that area as things are just developing all around them. The Macedonian War, the Illyrian situation, Carthage, all that. And it looked like if the Romans didn't intervene, maybe Antiochus was going to have a little bit more not support, but a little bit more favor in doing that. That just tells me that he should have, depending on where he was at, he was probably held up with the Ptolemaic kingdom and other things, but if he was able to accomplish all this during the Second Punic War, he would have been in a much better place. However, I don't know how things were in a lot of these regions during that time. I know there was a back and forth of Macedon trying to do the same thing and whatnot, but I don't know. It's just not the right time, especially when Rome's just looking to continuously expand and build their empire. Thank you guys for watching once again. I appreciate every single one of you. Until next time, peace out. Bye-bye. Have a good day.